All right. We've got a lively, long room today, so thank you for having me, first of all. Really appreciate coming back to this great city, this great conference. My second time here. Thank you very much. When we're talking about what topics you all might be interested in, one of the ones that we discussed was one of the big questions that I get all the time. John, what framework should I be using? Which one's better, Vue, React, or Angular? That's always the question that I get. And these change throughout the different years when there's different frameworks. So we talked about what to present today, and I wanted to show you my view on how you can choose your JavaScript framework. I'd like to start you all out with a question. And I promise to only ask you one question. How many of you here, raise your hand if you've ever been a child before? All of you not raising your hand, I don't know what you've done. Do you remember when you were a kid and your parents told you not to do something? What is the first thing you did? Yeah, exactly. You did it. Come on. They said, don't touch the stove, it's hot. And you said, I'm going to teach you a lesson. Yeah, but you only did it once, right? Maybe. Some of you, you still got bandages on. But when you think about that, this is a real experience that we go through a lot. Somebody tells you something is good, something is bad. They tell you, try this food, it's awful. Why do they do that anyway? They say, try something. They're trying to tell you about their experience, and then you have to listen to it and either follow it or find out for yourself. The problem with this is we all need to go through the experience ourselves before we can understand what's best for us. Just like the hot stove, hopefully you still don't do that, we had to try to find out why don't we touch fire? Because it burns. There's a quote from a book that I really like. It's from an author called Terry Brooks. And this quote is, life is an education. It is learned mostly through what you discover on your own and not through what other people like me tell you. When you think about that, it really stuck with me because every time I tried something for myself, I got a different experience, a different feeling than if somebody told me what to do. That's always the way it is. We'll come back to that. My name's John Papa, and I'm here to talk to you about how to choose your JavaScript framework. And you could use this philosophy for any technology. If you do Java, PHP, Ruby, Go, if you do COBOL on punch cards, I'm sorry. You could use this for all of it, though. The good news is our choices weren't always good. I mean, to be very honest, a couple years ago, we had a JavaScript flavor of the week. Seems like every week there was something new coming out. There was the Batman framework, which I personally was rooting for. It's such a cool name. There was Cycle, which was really hot last year. There was CanJS. There was Knockout. There's Ember still. There was Backbone. There's so many different frameworks. What do you choose? The good news is our options today, we have three really good ones. We have React, Angular, and Vue. There are other good options out there too, but these are the three leading choices over the last 2.5, 3 years. They've been out longer than that, and they're really solid. Okay, John, I don't really care. I've only got 5 minutes. Which one is better, right? Well, let's find out. So what do you look at to figure out what's best? When somebody says which one is best, how are you evaluating it? This is important for us to understand because what's best for you may not be what's best for you or for you. So how do we figure this out? Well, maybe what's important to you is how it scales. Or maybe the community and the documentation is really important. Some people like to make sure that they're using the framework that is the most popular at the moment in time because they get that peer pressure. And they're like, I've got to be using the one that's the most popular. Well, how do you know which one's most popular? There is no overall popularity contest out there, or is there? What features do they have? Is one have a better feature set than the other? What about longevity? How many of them have been out for a long time, and will they still be out next week, next month, next year, 5 years from now? What about performance and support? So all these different things can help us decide which one we go through. So here we go. Choosing the right framework, it starts with asking the right questions. The right question is not which one is better. We don't sit down and say, should I use this, this, or this? How do you choose? Where do we look? Well, the first place a lot of people look, because it's crowdsourcing, is with polls and surveys. We look to the internet. We say, hey, we're developers. If I go look at a survey or a poll, that must be what everyone's doing. And a lot of times those surveys and polls are confirmation bias, because they look at a certain subgroup of developers to answer the questions. And sometimes the way you ask a question can also sway what you do. So let's look at some of the most recent polls and surveys. One of my favorites is the state of JavaScript. And this came out about 6 months ago for last year. Really good survey. They do a really good job of trying to get people to pay attention and vote. I believe they had about 20,000 people. I might be off on that number for this one. But think about that, 20,000 out of how many developers are there in the world? Small subset. The one thing I totally agree with is everybody who was asked the question of, is JavaScript hard? Look how many people out there feel that JavaScript is hard. A lot. But yet, pretty much every one of us enjoys it. So it's hard, but we enjoy it. And maybe that's why we enjoy it. Something to think about. And then we look at React, Vue, and Angular. Would you use it again, which implies you've already used it, or would you like to learn it, which implies you haven't, but you'd like to go there? And if you look at these colors, what's interesting, I'll simplify for you. React was 83.9% in the lead, Vue was right behind it, and Angular was way down there. So if you look at this survey, it looks like nobody wants to do Angular compared to Vue or React. So we must just go to React, right? That's the answer. The survey, when it was asked, separated out Angular from AngularJS 1 year and combined them the other year. So the results could be different. But do we know that? No. So let's look at another survey, Stack Overflow. A lot of you probably go there and copy paste. I know I do. Doesn't always work. They asked a similar set of questions. What are your most popular frameworks and tools? Notice Node was up there. Angular's right behind it. React right behind that. So Angular's in the lead. But wait, where's Vue? Vue's not even on here. I find that kind of hard to believe. It's not even on the list, but yet it was like 70% of the other survey. So now I'm getting confused. Which one is correct? Twitter. Twitter must have the answer, because everything on Twitter is true. We'll get somebody like John Papa to do a poll, and I had 11,000 people answer this poll. React and Angular are way up there, and Vue right behind it. So we have 11,000 people, half the people who did the JavaScript survey, and we have yet another answer. What else could we look at? NPM, downloads, GitHub stars. GitHub has a new feature, used by, that some of you may have seen. If you haven't, definitely check it out. It'll show you if a GitHub repo is being used by other GitHub repos, which is really cool. There's all these metrics that are out there. None of them are perfect. The point of this is the surveys and the polls are good. They have good data. But remember that they don't always tell the whole story. Use them as a piece of the information to make your decision. Really, what we can take from this is that those three frameworks were so far above all the other JavaScript framework usages that they are the leading three. But which one is most used, which one is most popular, which one is most wanted to learn, it really depends upon who you ask and when you ask them. So what else do you do? I mean, all right, if we don't look at surveys and polls, another thing we can look at is our goals. What are we trying to achieve by using JavaScript? Okay. A lot of people tell me they want it to be easy. JavaScript can be hard. So how do you make it easy? When somebody says, oh, just go ahead and use Redux, it's easy. Easy is relative. Easy can be very relative to your own experience. So let me take it down on a different path. I'm going to teach you all how to draw a Star Wars character, one of my favorites. His name is Jango Fett. I'm a big Disney and Star Wars fan. First, I want you to draw this circle, okay? Imagine you draw that circle. You can do that. Next, connect it to make the helmet. Put 2 angles down and a little bump in the middle for the chin. After that, color in the helmet, and then just finish it like that. It's easy. If you can draw, it's easy. Did you just wake up knowing how to do this? No. This took me 14 days, 3 hours a day to do, and many years of drawing on the side to actually get to this point. It's easy. Okay, Redux, it's easy. So what does easy mean? Is it easy to learn, or is it easy to maintain? Is it easy to teach somebody else how to do what you're doing? To make it perform fast? To use bundling? To scale it? Is it easy to find answers to the problems that you have with the framework? The answer to that may be different for each one of the frameworks for you. So easy doesn't really help. I hear easy all the time about Vue. Oh, Vue is so easy. What's easy? Learning, using it, making big apps? What's easy? And is it easy if you don't know it? We all suffer from this one disease in this room. And don't worry, there's no shot that'll cure you. That's the curse of knowledge. Once you know something and you've learned it, you have lost all ability to go back in time and empathize with somebody else who doesn't know it. That's really powerful, and it's really hard for our entire industry. Once you learn something, you're like, well, all you do is you use gulp and a little bit of grunt, and now we use Webpack over here, and then we build it with some bundles, and then we do code splitting with dead code removal and AOT, and then we do tree shaking to get rid of the code. And the guy or girl next to you is going, what? I just wrote a JavaScript function. Because you have to build up your skills. The curse of knowledge is real. This is why people like Diego Maradona, Pele, and others in football have had trouble teaching other people. They're just like, just do this. But, for them it's easy. Empathy is the key. It's really important. When we're working with React, Angular developers, with Vue, with Ember, understanding that they all have different perspectives is really important. And being able to empathize with them, it's huge. Whether you're young, you're old, you're black, you're white, you're male, you're female, wherever you are in your career, having some empathy for somebody else who's using those tools is really important, or for learning them. But let's create some goals too. Let's figure out what are our goals when using these frameworks. And we have to identify those, and often those goals come down to features too. What are we trying to accomplish with the framework? So let's look at a couple of these. They all have a lot of features. But we talk often about components and performance, which one's faster, state management solutions like Redux, lazy loading, code splitting, bundle size, all these different things. Let's look at a couple of them across the 3 frameworks and see what happens. Can they all communicate between components? They all have components, but how do you communicate between them? Well, in Angular, we have these things called inputs. They actually were called props at one point. And then in Vue and React, we have props. That's how we pass data between components. And then, if we want to talk up the chain, we can use props to do that with React, or we can use emit or RxJS observables with Angular. All the features are the same, they're just different ways of implementing the same thing. And yes, there's other ways you can do this too in these tools. The point is, you can communicate between all these components very easily. Angular likes to use dependency injection. In React, often we use tools like the Redux pattern to go there, or we use hooks these days. In Vue, we can just import a module. What about lazy loading? Well, in Vue and React, you can lazy load a set of components. And you can do the same thing in Angular, but they put those sets of components in something called an ng module, which is really just like a list of those components. But again, it's really the same thing. You can lazy load these, and it does code splitting and dead code removal. What about the languages? This is one I heard for a long time that bothered a lot of people. I don't want to use Angular because I then have to learn TypeScript. Like TypeScript was this insurmountable mountain somewhere. Okay, don't want to learn TypeScript, not a problem. Vue is being rewritten in TypeScript as we speak, and they're incorporating that in version 3, and a lot of people use it today with it. And React developers, in many cases, are switching from Flow and JavaScript over to TypeScript now. So things that have been evolving here, it's just at different paces. Can you use Babel with these? Yes. Can you use TypeScript? Absolutely. Are they easy? Once you learn them, of course. But the point is with these that it's no longer a barrier getting into them. A lot of these tools are using transpilers because tools like TypeScript help the maintainers of the library keep Vue, React, and Angular up to date faster because they can find issues before they even compile them. So TypeScript's growing in all three of these. What about standout features? When you hear about React, the number one thing I hear is everything is a component. Everything. You're a component. You're a component. We're all components. That's React. You want a service? It's a component. I hear a lot, hey, John, I do Angular. How do I do this in React? You create a component. No. I just want to show an image. That's a component. I just want to get a Coke. That's a component. Whatever you do. And when you don't understand it, it sounds weird, but once you start trying it in React, it actually makes sense, because that's how they design it. And then I hear things like, well, Angular is so big, there's so much going on, it's a full framework, and I just need something simple like React that has just a component in it. Well, you can do all the same things in React as you can do in Angular, it's just they're all called components over here, and in Angular they're called different things. But there's nothing you can't do in any of these frameworks. We hear a lot in Vue that it's too simple. The people who don't like it say it's too simple. And you can't build real apps. Well, I'm here to tell you, I've met a lot of people who built some really big, scalable, performant apps with Vue. People like Sarah Drasner, people like Chris Fritz, people on the core team of Vue, and they're doing this all over the world. So simple doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't scale. So these are the standout features. Which one appeals to you, though? That might help you choose. Let's take a look at the big elephant in the room, Redux. This came out a couple of years ago. The React developers really got on board with it. And then Angular and Vue also picked it up. So Redux, this pattern allows you to manage state across your components in your application. It helps you take the data and share it in a way that has a single source of truth. Let's look at how React would do this. In React, we might have code like this, and I'll share all this code later. Here's a list of our actions in our code. We write out our actions, and then we write out our API to talk to our database. We write these reducers, which are just a fancy word for functions. The reducers save the data off to our state for us in a immutable way. And then we use the sagas to kind of wrap up the story. So we write this code to manage our state. And people say that, well, one framework is harder than the other to use these. So I wrote an app in React, Angular, and Vue that does exactly the same thing in all three, and I wrote them in ways that React, Angular, and Vue developers write them to compare. So here's the React way. Here's how Vuex does it with the Redux pattern. With Vuex doing the same thing, slightly different syntax. Here we define the names of our mutation types, because in Vue we do mutations instead of changing or making the data immutable. And after we have these types, we also have our actions. So here's the actions that you would write. There's a little bit less code with Vue than there is with React. Not a lot to worry about, really, but it's the same thing. Well, what about Angular? Angular, and those first two used JavaScript at the time, and this one's using TypeScript. With Angular, with NGRX, which is their version of the Redux pattern, here we can see the same app. In this case, This is the code to set up the list of the entities we have. And you can see there's just 2, heroes and villains. And then here's the code to actually add it to the library. Notice there's no scrolling. The interesting thing is, Angular, using TypeScript, was able to take advantage of generics so it could get rid of all the code duplication that you write with these patterns. And it's actually the least amount of code. So which one's best? They all do the same thing, slightly different syntax. So we looked at surveys and polls, we looked at our goals, we looked at easy, and we looked at features. And the whole point is you can build successful apps with any of these 3. So we're left at this place. What do we do? John, which one's best? Tell me which one's best so I can go home and tell the guy I work with that he's wrong and I'm right. That everybody at my company should switch. I get that too. It's kind of comical. But what do we do? So I started thinking about this. I've been doing software development for 20 years, and the one constant is that when I go talk to people what they do, and I ask them back, they say, which one should I pick? No matter what their question they're asking about, Java and C#, VB, Silverlight, Flash, SQL Server, Oracle, whatever it is. Which one should I pick? I'll then ask back, which one do you think you should pick? And usually the question comes back is they'll start telling me about their work environment, what their team knows, what skills they have, what experience they've had in building things. They'll tell me what features are important to them. These are the things, if you ask yourself, which one would you choose, you're probably going through this. And I'll tell you some of the answers I got from people. I asked people who do React, Angular, and Vue, people from the core team of all 3 of those. And they had one thing in common. When they had that one thing in common, it was how you feel. John, when I use Vue, I feel it's easier. John, when I use Angular, I feel like I can solve anything because the framework has something that solves just about everything I need to do. I feel that React is better or easier for me because when I start using it, it's just a component, so there's less things to learn. I feel like this one's good for me because I've already built 5 apps in Vue, React, Angular. Feel. And I started thinking about this. These are the people who run with these frameworks. None of them are saying, this one is clearly better because it has this feature and that one doesn't have it. None of them. None of them said it's faster and this one's slower. And we've all seen those presentations where we have React, Vue, and Angular up on stage, and somebody shows you why one of them is better than the other because they built it, and maybe it's an Angular developer who built it, and they built the React and Vue apps in a way that a React and Vue developer would never do. And they end up being slow and clunky, and they don't work, and they show clearly Angular's better, see? That's like saying, hey, here's my favorite child up here. Doesn't work. But I asked them this, they all said, I feel like this one's right for me. And that's really powerful. I'll bet you all have a favorite. And if you're really honest with yourself, you choose the one that you choose not because it's better, but because you feel good writing code in it. You like to do it. We all find jobs doing the technologies that we enjoy, and when they stop using those technologies, often we find another job. But we try to do that because it makes us feel good. Before we switch into the next gear of this, I want to really leave you with, try each one of these. Try Angular, React, and Vue. Spend one day on each framework and build something. Build the same thing in each one. See what happens. Try to understand it and build it the way that the framework teaches you. Find some of those tutorials online and find out how to build it. You might be surprised with what you find out. When I went into this myself about 1.5 years ago, I thought I was going to hate React. I really did, to be very honest. I'd done Vue and Angular before, and I hadn't done React really seriously. And I tried it, and there were things that really surprised me. I'm like, this is pretty cool. And then at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I like all 3 of these. I could literally do all 3 of these and have a lot of fun. And there are things I like about each one, maybe better than another one. I kind of like that. I can create a component in React in like one line of code. That's really cool. I can have a file with very simple components in it. I like that Angular has dependency injection because it makes solving services and sharing of data so much easier than the other two frameworks. I like the syntax in Vue because it really gets rid of a lot of overhead, the way they make you code things. I like it. I like the way animations are baked into Vue. The real moral is to be okay with all three being awesome. And you can build all three. They all have components. You can build the same apps, and I'll give you the links to all three of these apps, and you can try them out. Angular, React, and Vue. The apps that are running, you'll find when you run these apps, there's a blue one for React, there's a red one for Angular, and then there's a green one for Vue. And if you run them side by side, they all run the same way. The only thing I shared between the three was the database in the back end and the CSS, just so they would look the same. So you can run all three of these. Let's flip over to a demo and take a look real quick. All right, so first, where is it? Here's the three apps running on screen, live right now. And we'll refresh that. There we go. Somebody changed my data. So these three apps are all running against the same database. We have React, we have Angular, we have Vue. If I pop open, let's say, React, and I go to the developer tools, I can open up the Redux tool on the right. And I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see here that Redux is working in React just the way you would normally expect. And you can see the state in the state tree over on the right-hand side. Well, that's great. What about Angular? Does Angular work like that? If we open up Angular, we can open up the Redux dev tools. And look, it's got the same thing over on this side with heroes and entities. If I go to villains, then we'll have villains down here too. Okay. What about Vue? So here we've got Vue. We'll go to Redux. And guess what? Same things down here. This one's looking at heroes and villains. And there's our entities down below. And there's my daughters and my son. Yes, they are the villains in this app. All right. So we've got the three apps up and running, and all three of those will run those tools for you. The code for each of these, I'm using a tool called Peacock that I wrote that actually shows you in the right hand or the left hand side, it shows you the color, which helps me differentiate which one I'm looking at. So here's Vue, here's Angular, here's React. All these are running right now. If you zoom in on these, you can see here is the store for Redux, because that's what we're focusing on. But let's go ahead and take a look at the heroes component for just the details in React. We'll zoom in a little bit. So here, we've got our hero detail class, and I'm using a class in this case, but I also use some functions for components in React because you can use both. So we've got a hero detail component. We're handling our saves. Down here, we're rendering out our HTML for our template, and we're embedding data where we can. And then we've got our input details, which is actually showing the names of the people. If we flip over to Angular, and I go find hero detail, wow, there is no Vue file in here. It got confused. Let's see. This one. Yep. So in Angular, we have two files. We have an HTML file for the template. This is showing us the HTML. It's the same HTML that we had over in the React app. It's just its own file. And if we go to hero detail component, here is the code for it. So the big difference between Angular and React here is that Angular puts the template and the TypeScript into different files, whereas React, you put them in the same file with the JSX embedded inside of the render function. And then in Vue, we can go look at our heroes. Wrong page. And in Vue, they do something similar, where they've got the code and the template in the same file, just like React does, but they separate them out where there's a template up top, and then there's the code right below it. But a view also supports the JSX style or the TSX style, so you can embed the template inside the code. Now, you might think, you know what, I like having all my code in one file, so I like Vue and React. In Angular, you can actually do the same thing. You can put all your templates and your scripts in the same file if you want to, and effectively still getting a single file component. Something else I wanted to show was I wrote Cypress tests. Many of you may have used Cypress end-to-end testing today. Cypress is a great framework for doing end-to-end testing, and I really enjoy using it. What's nice is I was able to write the same exact end-to-end test with Cypress on all three frameworks and run them, and you're seeing them right here. So the runners for these are down in the corner. You can see one's running Angular, one's running Vue, one's running React. And all three of those are running in these upper corners. So I can rerun all three tests up here, and hopefully I didn't break them in the time I walked up to the stage. And it's running through those tests, hitting the live servers, and making sure they work. What's nice is you can use any tool with any of these framework choices as well. So the code's similar, the solutions are similar, the features are similar, the tools that we use are similar. The performance, the bundle size, the speed, the scalability, the maintainability, it's all similar. Feel. That's the one thing that's different. You like React. You like Vue. You don't like anything. I can't help you. What feels best to you? It's really important. And me standing up here telling you one of these is better than the other is the last thing you need. Because you know what? If I tell you React is best, what are you going to do? You're going to put your hand on that hot stove just to teach me a lesson. That's what you're going to do. Life is an education. It's learned mostly through what you discover on your own, you on your own, not through what other people tell you. My name's John Papa, and I encourage you to try all three of these. Do what feels best. Hit these links, and you can see the GitHub repos. There's a live demo for all three of them running up in the cloud on Azure. You can actually get to all the code for all three of them. Download it, try it yourself, experiment with it. The README should explain everything you need to do. I appreciate you all coming. I hope you had a great day, and please do what's best for you all. Thanks.
John, before we let you go, I'd like to do a quick Q&A. Any questions for John Papa? Questions, comments? Anything to add to the conversation? If you raise your hand like that again, I'll give you the microphone. Okay. Anybody in the back? Anybody in the front? Alrighty, I get it. It's getting late. People want to chill. It's Friday afternoon.
I can understand.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.